My name is Claire, and I work at the customer service desk of the airport. I've been here for 6 years, and I thought I had seen it all. Angry passengers, lost luggage, missed flights. But that morning, something felt different. It started when I noticed a man sitting near gate 14. He looked out of place. His clothes were torn and stained, his hair was messy, and he clutched a small, dirty backpack like it was his most valuable possession. His shoes were worn out, barely holding together. Passengers walking by gave him uneasy glances, some whispering to each other. A few even pointed at him. I watched as a security guard Tom approached him. Tom was a good guy, but he didn't have much patience. "Sir," Tom said, standing over him, "you can't stay here. This is an airport, not a shelter." The man didn't argue. He just sat there, staring at the ground. "I said you have to leave," Tom repeated, a little firmer this time. The man finally looked up, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Something sad, lost. But he nodded and slowly got to his feet. He didn't say a word, just slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked toward the exit. I don't know why, but something in my gut told me we had made a mistake. Something wasn't right. And 7 minutes later, the entire airport would realize just how wrong we were. I watched the man as he walked toward the exit, his shoulders slumped like he was carrying the weight of the world. Something about him unsettled me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way he moved, slow, almost hesitant, like he didn't really belong anywhere. Or maybe it was his silence. Most people in his position would have argued, pleaded, or at least mumbled something under their breath. But not him. Then, just as he stepped outside, something happened. A loud announcement echoed through the airport speakers. "Attention all passengers and staff. Flight 237 to New York has been delayed due to an unexpected issue. We will provide updates shortly." At that moment, my manager Lisa rushed toward the desk, looking panicked. She was holding her phone tightly, staring at the screen as if she had just seen a ghost. "Claire," she gasped. "Where is he?" I frowned. "Who?" "The man," she said, her voice shaking. "The one security just kicked out." My heart skipped a beat. "Why? What's going on?" Lisa didn't answer. Instead, she turned to Tom, the security guard. "Go get him. Now." Tom hesitated, clearly confused. "Now Tom," Lisa snapped, something I had never seen her do before. Tom, looking unsure but realizing the urgency, hurried toward the exit. I followed him, my pulse racing. Who was this man, and why was Lisa suddenly so desperate to find him? Something told me we were about to find out. Tom and I rushed toward the exit, scanning the crowd for the man we had just turned away. My heart pounded as I looked around, hoping he hadn't wandered too far. Then I spotted him. He was sitting on a bench near the taxi stand, his hands resting on his lap, staring at the ground. He looked lost, like he didn't know where to go next. Tom walked up to him, clearing his throat. "Sir, we need you to come back inside." The man looked up, confused. "Why?" His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in days. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Just, please, someone needs to see you." The man hesitated for a moment, then slowly got up. This time, there was something different in the way he walked, like he knew this wasn't just some ordinary request. As we walked back inside, Lisa was waiting for us at the entrance. She looked pale, her hands gripping her phone tightly. When she saw the man, her breath hitched. "It's you," she whispered. The man didn't respond, just stared at her with tired eyes. Lisa turned her phone toward me, and my breath caught in my throat. On the screen was a breaking news article. A well-known billionaire, Nathaniel Carter, had gone missing 2 weeks ago. His family had been searching for him everywhere. The headline read, "Business tycoon Nathaniel Carter feared dead, last seen at local airport." I looked at the photo in the article, then back at the man standing before us. The same piercing blue eyes, the same sharp jawline, now covered in scruffy stubble. The only difference was the state he was in. He looked nothing like the powerful CEO from the picture. The homeless man we had kicked out was one of the richest men in the country. And we had just thrown him out like he was nothing. The silence that followed was unbearable. Lisa's eyes were wide with shock, her mouth slightly agape, as she tried to process what she had just realized. Tom and I stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Nathaniel Carter, the billionaire, the man whose company had been in the news for years, was standing right in front of us. But how? Why was he here, looking like someone who had nothing? I swallowed hard. trying to find my voice. "Mr. Carter? Is it really you?" He nodded slowly, but there was no arrogance, no pride in his expression. It was just exhaustion. "I'm sorry for everything," he said quietly. "I never wanted to be recognized." His voice cracked, and for the first time I could see the pain in his eyes, the kind of pain that ran deeper than anything I had ever witnessed. Lisa stepped forward, still in shock, but trying to compose herself. "Mr. Carter, we didn't." "I know," he interrupted. "You didn't know. It's all right. I've been running from my life for a long time now." His voice was steady, but there was a faint tremor that made me wonder just how long he had been carrying this burden. For a moment, none of us knew what to say. The man standing in front of us was someone who could have anything: money, fame, power. And yet, here he was, alone and broken. He looked at us, his expression softening. "I didn't want anyone to know who I was. I've been through some things. Terrible things. Things that have changed me forever." His words hung in the air like a weight, and it was clear that he wasn't just talking about the recent months of being missing. Lisa took a step closer. "What happened to you?" Nathaniel glanced down at his worn clothes, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "I thought I had everything: money, success, the perfect life. But I lost it all. My company, my family, my sanity. I couldn't keep pretending to be someone I wasn't, so I ran away." The words stung. I could hear the shame in his voice, the sense of defeat that echoed in every syllable. It was hard to imagine someone who had it all, only to lose it in the blink of an eye. "You don't have to keep running," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're not alone anymore." He looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude, but also hesitation. "I don't know if I can ever go back to who I was. I don't think I even want to." We stood there for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. There was so much more to this story than any of us could have imagined. We stood there in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Nathaniel's eyes never left the ground, and I could see the emotional battle he was fighting. It was clear he wasn't ready to return to the life he had left behind. "I've seen things," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Done things that no one should ever have to." Lisa and I exchanged a glance. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "What do you mean?" Nathaniel shook his head, almost as if he didn't want to speak the words aloud. "Things that haunt me. I don't know how to explain it, but everything I built, every decision I made, it all turned into a lie. I thought I was helping people, but I was only hurting them. In the end, I hurt myself the most." I couldn't imagine the kind of guilt that weighed on him, the kind of regret that was so deep, it drove him to disappear. I thought about all the people who had praised him, who had admired him for his success. None of them had any idea of the man behind the image. "Do you ever think about going back?" I asked cautiously. He met my gaze, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. But just as quickly, it faded. "I don't know if I can," he replied, his voice cracking. "I don't know if I even deserve to go back. I destroyed everything. I lost my family, my friends, my purpose. Maybe I'm meant to disappear, to be forgotten." His words hit me hard. The weight of his loss, the self-doubt that consumed him, it was more than anyone should carry. And yet here he was, clinging to a life he didn't want to return to, a life that had betrayed him in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. "We can help you," I said softly, my heart aching for him. "You don't have to face this alone. You don't have to run away anymore." Nathaniel's eyes softened, but there was still a hint of uncertainty. "Phil, how can you help me when I can't even help myself?" Lisa put a hand on his shoulder, her voice steady. "We can start by talking. Take it one step at a time. Whatever you decide, you don't have to do it alone. You have a choice now." The tension in his shoulders eased just a fraction, but it was enough to show that he was starting to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. For Nathaniel, the road to redemption would be long. It would be filled with painful truths and broken pieces of a life he could never fully reclaim. But as he stood there looking at us, I saw something in him that I hadn't seen before. A glimmer of hope. Maybe there was still a chance for him to rebuild, to find himself again. Maybe he wasn't beyond saving after all. The minutes stretched on as we stood there, the weight of Nathaniel's words settling around us like a thick fog. He had been through so much, and yet there was still a small flicker of light within him, a light that hadn't completely gone out. "I can't promise that everything will be fixed," Nathaniel said quietly, breaking the silence. "But I think I want to try." Lisa nodded, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "That's all we ask, one step at a time." I could see the pain in his eyes, but there was also something else, something fragile. Like he was finally starting to believe that he wasn't completely lost. He wasn't just the man who had disappeared from the world. He was still Nathaniel Carter. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to piece his life back together. As we walked back into the terminal, Nathaniel seemed lighter, though his steps were still slow, cautious. He had a long road ahead of him, but at least now, he wasn't walking it alone. The airport had once been a place of impersonal encounters for me, a place where people came and went without leaving much of an impact. But now, it felt different. Today, we had been a part of something much bigger than ourselves. Nathaniel glanced around, taking in the bustling scene around him. "I never thought I'd be back here like this," he muttered, almost to himself. "But I guess I'm not the man I used to be." "Maybe that's a good thing," I said softly, looking at him. "Maybe this is your chance to find a new beginning." He looked at me with a quiet gratitude, the tension in his shoulders easing just a little more. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to find out." We walked together, the uncertainty of the past lingering in the air, but the possibility of something new. The possibility of healing, beginning to emerge. Lisa and I helped him to a small cafe near the gate, where he ordered a cup of coffee, the first real thing he had consumed in what felt like forever. As he sipped it slowly, he glanced up at us. "I never wanted to be this person," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was so caught up in the chase for success that I didn't realize I was losing everything that truly mattered. I couldn't imagine the burden of living a life based on lies, of watching everything crumble away. But I could see the resolve in his eyes, the determination to not let his past define him forever. "I don't know what the world expects of me," Nathaniel continued, "but I know I have to make things right, even if it means starting from the very bottom again." And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just a story about a man who had lost everything. It was a story about redemption, about the power of second chances, and the strength it takes to rebuild after everything falls apart. Nathaniel wasn't the man he used to be, but maybe, just maybe, he was becoming the man he was meant to be. Over the next few weeks, Nathaniel's journey of redemption wasn't easy, but it was one step at a time. The airport, once a place where he had been discarded like a forgotten object, became a place of reflection. A space where he could slowly start to rebuild his shattered identity. He didn't rush back into the life he had left behind. Instead, he took it slow. Lisa and I made sure to check in with him often, offering support when he needed it, and giving him space when he asked for it. Nathaniel spent his days at the airport cafe, reading, reflecting, and taking small steps toward healing. He wasn't hiding anymore. He didn't need to be. The guilt was still there, heavy on his chest, but so was the understanding that he could change, that he could be more than the man he once was. One afternoon, I sat with him, sipping my coffee as he told me about a conversation he had with his sister, Sarah. "I didn't expect her to answer my call," he said, his voice low. "But she did. And for the first time in so long, I didn't feel like a failure." I could hear the emotion in his voice, the vulnerability that he had kept locked away for so long. "It's not going to be easy to repair everything," Nathaniel continued, "but maybe it's worth trying." I nodded. "It is. It always is." There were still hard days. Days when the shame threatened to overtake him. Days when the past seemed too much to face. But with each small victory he began to feel more human again. The world was no longer just a stage for his success. It was a place where he could rediscover who he was, beyond the man people had once worshipped. Then, one day, just as he was starting to find his rhythm, he received an unexpected call from his lawyer. It was about his company, the one he had walked away from. His company was in trouble, major trouble. I could see the anxiety flicker in Nathaniel's eyes as he listened to the details, his hand gripping the phone tightly. He was being asked to come back, to fix what he had left behind. But this time, he wasn't rushing to the front lines of a battle he didn't understand. "I don't know if I can do this," Nathaniel muttered, pacing the small cafe table. "I don't even know if I should." I stood up, walking over to him and placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Maybe it's not about fixing everything at once," I said. "Maybe it's about making the right choices, one decision at a time. You don't have to go back to the old Nathaniel Carter. You just have to find a way to be the new one." Nathaniel stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing my words carefully. Then, with a slow nod, he let out a breath. "Okay, one step at a time." And just like that, Nathaniel had taken the most important step of all, the step toward reclaiming his life on his own terms, not as the billionaire he once was, but as the man he was becoming. It had been a few months since Nathaniel made that decision to move forward. Slowly but surely, he had begun to reclaim his life, bit by bit. The road wasn't always easy. There were days when he felt like giving up, when the weight of his past seemed too heavy to carry. But he kept pushing forward, taking each day as it came. Nathaniel never returned to his old company. Instead, he used his skills and resources to help rebuild smaller businesses that had been overlooked by the corporate giants. He used his influence to fund initiatives that helped struggling communities, people who had been left behind by the very system he once embodied. I remember the first time I saw him speak at one of those small business conferences. He was standing there, nervous but determined, in front of a room full of entrepreneurs and business owners. His voice was shaky at first, but as he spoke, there was a raw honesty that filled the room. He didn't try to hide his mistakes or sugarcoat his past. Instead, he spoke about what he had learned, the importance of humility, of prioritizing people over profits, of valuing life beyond success. "There was a time when I thought my worth was measured by how much money I made or the title I held," Nathaniel said, his voice gaining strength. "But that wasn't who I was. It's not who I am anymore." As he spoke, I could see the change in him. The man who had once been consumed by power and wealth was now someone who valued authenticity, connection, and helping others rise. That day, Nathaniel didn't just speak to those in the room, he spoke to himself. After the event, as we were walking out, Lisa turned to me with a smile. "He's really doing it, isn't he?" she said. I smiled back, watching Nathaniel chat with a young woman who had approached him after his speech. He was genuinely engaged, listening to her ideas with interest, offering advice without a trace of arrogance. "Yeah," I said, my voice filled with quiet pride. "He really is." It wasn't about turning back the clock or erasing the past. Nathaniel would always carry the weight of his mistakes, but that didn't mean he couldn't start again. This time, it wasn't about being the richest or the most powerful. It was about being a man who could look himself in the mirror and know he was doing something good. He still had a long way to go, but Nathaniel Carter was no longer lost. He was finding his way, one step at a time. As the months passed, Nathaniel's transformation became more than just personal. It started to ripple outward, affecting everyone he came into contact with. His old life was no longer a shadow hanging over him. Instead, it had become a lesson in what truly mattered. One evening, as we sat at the same cafe where it all began, Nathaniel looked over at me, his eyes thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder if we're ever really ready for the changes life throws at us?" I paused, taking in his words. It was a question that had lingered in my own mind since we first met. Nathaniel had been pushed to the brink, and yet here he was, finding meaning and purpose in ways I don't think anyone, not even him, had anticipated. "I think we're never ready," I said finally. "Life doesn't wait for us to be prepared. It just happens, but that doesn't mean we can't learn, grow, and make the most of it." Nathaniel smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with a hint of warmth. "You know, I used to think I had to have everything figured out. But now, I realize that maybe the beauty is in not knowing, of still having the chance to discover who we are and who we can become." There was a serenity in his words, one that seemed to come from a place deep within. The man who had once feared losing control now understood that sometimes letting go was the only way to truly gain freedom. The phone rang just then, his assistant calling to update him on a new initiative he had been working on for months. The smile on Nathaniel's face was genuine, a reminder of how far he had come. "I think I'm finally starting to enjoy the ride," he said, hanging up the phone. Lisa, who had been sitting with us, gave him a knowing look. "It's not about the destination, right?" "Exactly," Nathaniel said, his voice full of quiet conviction. "It's about how we live each day, the little choices we make, the people we help along the way." And just like that, I realized that this story, Nathaniel's story, wasn't just about redemption. It was about the endless possibilities that come with embracing change, with accepting that life is never static. The journey itself was the reward, one filled with unexpected turns, painful lessons, and moments of pure grace. It had been nearly a year since Nathaniel's journey began, since that fateful moment at the airport when he was discarded like a forgotten memory. Now, as I watched him stand before a new audience, the transformation was undeniable. Gone was the man who had once defined himself by his wealth, his status, his power. The man before me was calm, centered, and focused on making the world better, one small action at a time. Nathaniel had become a philanthropist, using his resources to support causes he had once turned a blind eye to. His days were filled with meetings and calls, but he didn't rush through them anymore. He listened, he cared, and most importantly, he never forgot where he had come from. One evening, as we sat together in a quiet park, watching the sunset, Nathaniel turned to me, a soft smile on his face. "I never imagined it would be like this," he said. "I thought I was meant for something bigger, something grander. But this life, this peace, it feels more real than anything I've ever known." I nodded, the quiet beauty of the moment sinking in. "Sometimes, we have to lose everything to find what really matters," I said. Nathaniel chuckled softly, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I don't think I ever lost everything," he said quietly. "I just stopped holding on to the wrong things." It was a simple truth, but one that carried so much weight. Nathaniel had learned that what truly matters in life isn't what you accumulate, it's who you become along the way. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the park, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. Nathaniel had found his redemption, not in grand gestures or public accolades, but in the quiet moments of reflection, in the small acts of kindness, and in the willingness to be a better person. He didn't need to be a billionaire to make a difference. He didn't need to be admired by millions. He simply needed to be true to himself. And in doing so, he had become something far more valuable than anything money could buy. A man of integrity, compassion, and real purpose. And as I watched him walk forward into the future, I knew that Nathaniel's story wasn't just about redemption. It was about the power of starting over, of embracing change and finding strength in the most unexpected places. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones within ourselves. But when we confront our demons, when we choose to heal, and when we choose to do good in the world, that's when true transformation happens. Nathaniel's journey wasn't over, it had only just begun, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of where it would take him. And I realized, watching him, that maybe none of us are ever really lost. Maybe, deep down, we all just need a little nudge, a little help, and the courage to believe that we can rise again. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story and found it meaningful. If you did, please like, comment, and share to help spread the word. It really means a lot. And if you're not subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Your support makes all the difference and helps me create more stories for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. See you in the next one.